Hey guys, so today we are going to learn how to create an apple in Photoshop. Now, I encourage you guys to follow along with me and upload the final solution to Beachboard's Dropbox when you're done. You do not have to use my color scheme. You can do anything you want. I've had students do a purple apple, a green apple, red apple. So I'm just going to take you through my experience with creating a red apple. So we're going to start by choosing File, New. Now we want to name this document Apple underscore and then your last name and your first name, making sure you capitalize your first and last initial. We're going to go ahead and set this up in pixels. And so you're going to go ahead and change that here. Once you choose pixels, we're going to choose our width to be 800 by 800. And your orientation doesn't matter because this is a square. You want to make sure you have this set in a resolution of 300. Our color mode as RGB. And you want to go ahead and have a white background. Once you have all this set up, go ahead and choose Create. The next thing I want you to check is your toolbar. So on your toolbar, if you go down to the very bottom where it has 3 little dots and we click on it, we can choose to edit our toolbar. If you go ahead and choose Restore Defaults, this will make sure that your toolbar and my toolbar have all of the same features inside. Go ahead and choose Done. If you want to customize it though, that is where you would want to do that. Right at the moment though, we just want to make sure we are finding all of these same tools in the same area. If you have a different tool visible, but you see me clicking here, just click and look at these options underneath. The next thing I want you to do is make sure your rulers are on. If your rulers are not visible, make sure you go to View Rulers or hit Command or Control R, and they will turn on or off. Once you have your rulers visible, go ahead and pull down your guides to the center. If your measurements are slightly off, you can have your snap feature on, which is right here, snap and snap to guides, and that will help you bring down your guides directly into the center of your form or your document. So mine snaps right there, and my vertical guide grabbing my left hand side over, and it should snap right to the center of my document there. So I have my guide set up in the center of my document, and now it's time to start our apple. Create a new layer by clicking the new layer icon, the bottom here of your layers panel. And we're going to go ahead and click on where it says layer 1 by double clicking and typing the word apple, and then clicking somewhere in the light gray area to deactivate it. So now we have the apple typed and we're ready to start. We're going to grab our ellipse marquee tool. By clicking on this, we're going to go to the center of our document, holding down Alt for center out and Shift for proportions. We're going to click and pull and create a nice perfect circle here in the middle of our document. Now that we have our marquee, I also refer to as our dancing ants, moving around here, we know we can fill this form on our apple layer. So the next thing I want you to do is choose the color of the apple you like to do. Since I'm doing red, I'm going to choose my brightest color, and that's same for you. Whatever your color is, you want to choose your brightest color as your foreground color. So I'm going to click on my foreground color and choose a very bright red. Mine's coming to about 99% magenta and 100% yellow for my CMYK. I'm going to go ahead and choose OK. Then I'm going to go to my dark red here, and I like to slide up to my top and then go down so my red is going to blend well. So then I go down and choose the red I want I'm going to just kind of choose a rich red here. Looks pretty good. And I'm going to choose OK. Now that I have a dark red and a light red set up, I'm going to grab my gradient tool on the toolbar, making sure your brightest is on your left and your darkest is on your right. If you do not see this, check here under reverse to make sure that you can turn and switch that color palette. So again, we want the brightest on the left, darkest on the right. Next, I want you to choose the style of gradient you want. I would like a radial gradient since we're doing a circle, so I'm going to choose here. Making sure my color mode is normal and my opacity is 100%. I want to go to the center of my circle and I'm going to click and then I'm going to drag and pull just slightly out of my edge to create a nice bright ball. Now it's a little too dark for me on the edge, so I'm going to pull a little bit more out. Let's try a little bit farther. I like that a lot better. So I'm going to go with this one here. And you can keep doing it until you get the coloring that you want. Now that this is created, I'm going to create an effect on this layer. To do that, I'm going to create an add layer style. This is on the very bottom of your layers panel. You'll see an FX. You're going to click that and you're going to go down to create inner shadow. That's our first feature we want to do. With our inner shadow feature selected, we want to look at our settings here. The first thing here is multiply. I have that set with multiply. We have it at black. We have our opacity set at 75%. We want to change our angle to -90. As you can see, it brings a nice dark hue. If you're not seeing your preview, go ahead and make sure that this option here is checked where it says preview. Next, we're going to check our distance, have it 45. We have our choke set at 0, our size set at 80. We're going to leave our contour in a nice diagonal line, our noise set at 0. Once we have all of that done, we're going to go one step down here in the Styles panel and choose our Inner Glow feature. And I'm going to choose my Inner Glow and look at my settings here. I want the first thing to be multiply as my blending mode, my opacity set at 30%, my noise set at 0. This is very common in Inner Glow to be either a yellow or a white color, so you'll want to click here and choose a dark rich black. You want to set your technique to softer, your source set at edge, your choke set at 0%, your size set at 20, and again leaving your contour at a nice angle, leaving your range at 50% and your jitter at 0. Once you have both of these set up, go ahead and choose OK. Next, we're going to create a new layer and name this texture by clicking on where it says layer 1 and typing texture. Again, making sure you have your dancing ants on. We have our foreground and background set with our bright red and our dark red. Then I'm going to go up to filter and I'm going to choose render and I'm going to choose clouds. You can do this more than once by going to filter clouds until you get the result that you like. That one works for me. I like that. That's good. So now that I have the clouds that I like, I'm going to go up to filter. I'm going to go down to distort and I'm going to choose spherize. Then I'm going to choose my amount to be 100% by dragging this bar all the way over to the right so you can actually see the bulge happening here. Once that's set up, choose OK. And now you can see that the actual texture wrapped around the form to give it more of like a moon or a ball shape. Now that we have that set up, you're going to go ahead and change the blending mode, which is right here where it says normal, and we're going to change that to soft light, leaving our opacity set at 100%. Now you'll start to really kind of see it only on the edges it'll kind of create a nice little texture on your form. Next, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to name this one Dots. Now for the dots, whatever the color is that you're creating for your apple, you'll want to choose a whitish version of that color. So for me, mine's red, so I'm going to choose like a pink, and I'm going to set my foreground color as that kind of like pinkish white color. If you have a green, you want to go with a whitish green, even if you choose yellow, purple, so on. And once I have the brush tool selected, I'm going to choose the panel button up here at the top, and I'm going to customize my brush. With my brush panel open, I'm going to make sure my size is set at somewhere around 8. You could even do let's try 7. Let's see what 7 looks like. 7's good. We're going to have our hardness set at 100% and our spacing set at 1 is fine. 1, 0, something like that. Once that is set, go ahead and making sure you're on the dots layer here, click around the form randomly and loosely. All the way around. Now we're going to be adding another size in this, so you want to leave a little spacing in between, but kind of go crazy. Have a little fun with it. All right, we're getting closer here. Done. Now that I have that selected, I want to reduce my size. So right now I did 7, so now I'm going to do a 4. And then do it again, all the way around. I think I'm starting to see spots. Holy moly. Okay. Once you've had your fun and you've made your wonderful dots all over your apple, we want to go back to our dots layer, and the next thing we want to do is blur this. So we're going to go up to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. You want to make sure your degree is set at 90 or -90, so you get a vertical blur. And you want to set your distance at 5, looks good, and choose OK. Now that you have that created, go ahead and we want to spherize this like we did with the texture. So we're going to go to Filter, we're going to go to Distort, Spherize, and again making sure it's 100%, choose OK, and it will round out those little dots all the way around. Now we're going to go to our blending mode where it says normal, and we're going to choose this to be overlay. We're going to reduce the opacity quite a bit here, so we can kind of see them, but not too much, 13%. Now one other final little thing I want to do is create a slight outer glow on these, and by doing that we're going to go down to our FX symbol and we're going to go down to outer glow. And on the outer glow we want to make sure we're set at multiply, our opacity set at 60%, our noise is 0, and again if you don't have this set up, set your outer glow to be a dark rich black, just like we did with our inner shadow. We're going to have our techniques for softer, spreader at 0, size at 8. Leave the contour at an angle here, and I'm going to actually reduce my range here to about 18. And then leave my jitter at 0. Alright, once that's created, choose OK. And then depending on your preference, you can adjust the dot size to be, the opacity to be less or more. depending on how much you want this to show. But right at the moment, this is looking good. So I have that set up. Now, your dots could be smaller or larger depending on what you created. This is just what I have so far. All right, now that we have that created, the next thing we want to do is deselect our apple so we don't have the dancing ants. So we're going to hit Command or Control D and deselect that. And we're going to go and create a new layer, and we're going to name this new layer Dent. Now this is where we're creating the core of the apple. So depending on where you want it, I'm kind of looking at this little area here. I'm going to grab my ellipse tool and using this kind of feature to figure out where I want my dent to be, I'm going to hold down Alt for center out, but this time I'm not going to pull Shift because I want it to be kind of like an oval. So I'm going to grab this here, kind of estimate where I want my size to be in my dent, and I'm going to fill this with white. By hitting Shift, Delete, get your shortcut here, we're going to go ahead and choose Contents White. Choose OK. Next, we're going to deselect, and we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to name this one Dent Shadow. Now on this dent shadow, you're going to grab the ellipse tool again, and we're going to go to the bottom area of the white ellipse, and we're going to hold down Shift and Alt and kind of create a circle form here of the core. And I'm going to hit Shift Backspace, and this time rather than filling this with white, I'm actually going to go up to color. Now you can make the core coloring whatever you want. You can do black, you can do whatever dark shade of whatever color you have, but I actually want to do a little bit of green in the red as if it's ripening, maybe. So I'm going to go in here and kind of choose like a green, but black, like so it has like a hint of that green in the core. So I'm going to choose like a dark green, and I'm going to choose OK. I'm going to go ahead and fill with that. And then I'm going to deselect. Now, this next tip is we're going to learn a different way to mask. So in the past, I've shown you masking using this with the layer mask, but now we're going to use an actual layer as a mask. Now to do this, you need to hold down the Alt key, and you're going to click the little line that's between the two layers in the layers panel, and you can see an option comes up where you see a black arrow and a white square. You're going to click that line with that visual showing, and you can see that the black or green or whatever color you made little dot is now playing peekaboo with the white ellipse. So now if we go to our dent layer and we choose multiply, multiply is a blending mode that hides white, just like screen hides black. So now by clicking multiply, you only see the dent shadow. Now on this dent shadow layer, we are going to blur this to soften the edge. So we're going to go up to filter, go down to blur, and choose Gaussian blur. Gaussian blurred is center out. We're going to reduce this a significant amount, and depending on the amount you want, go ahead and choose. Now obviously you do not want to see the rim, the edge of the ellipse, so you definitely want it to be less, and you can keep going, but you want to see a nice crisp front of the dent. So depending on how much, you can go, for me personally, see right there, that's too much because you can start to see the edge, and that's what I'm looking at right here. You can see that that's too much for me. So I'm going to go down, but for you it might be, depends on how big you made your dot and how big you made your ellipse to find the right size. 10 still a little bit, and if I go to 9.5, that seems to be perfect. I don't see any actual rim, but it does suggest the core. So mine's 9.5, yours might be different. Play with that. Go ahead and choose OK. Once you have that and you're happy, I can back and zoom out. So I have my core created here. and my form. I'm going to go ahead and hide my guides here for you. So I'm going to hit Command or Control colon or semicolon. And now I have my guides off so you can see my dent. Nice and created. So you want to, again, make sure you avoid those visible edges at the top, and once you have this created, you are good to go for the next step. Now that we've created the dent and we've made this like core kind of area, let's work on some highlights. So the first highlight I'm going to do is a front highlight and a back highlight for my core. Now you can do this multiple ways. So just to kind of show you, I'm going to show you two ways. So let's start with the first highlight. And for this one here, I'm going to name it Highlight 1. Now one way to create a highlight is by using the ellipse tool, where you can create a nice big ellipse kind of off the center of your form to go with the apple edging. And I'm just looking at my bottom kind of form here if I wanted to. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill with white by hitting Shift Backspace and choosing white, and then OK. Now, as long as I have my ellipse marquee on, I can actually go up with this, and you can see that. You can move around. So I just want to show you, I want roughly that size, but I can't do it verbatim. So I know I need to start kind of about here. So I'm going to deselect by hitting Command or Control T, and then holding down Alt when I pull, I'm going to click and pull to get roughly the size I want. So I'm looking there, and then delete. So I've essentially created, by hitting deselect again, one highlight. That is one way to make just a simple white highlight. Another way to make one, if I went ahead and hit Command or Control A and delete, so I can delete this. All right, my next option I can do is with the pen tool. By clicking on the pen tool and going up here on the very top where you choose shape versus path, you want to make sure you're filling with the color you intend. I want white. So with a shape feature of your pen tool and white fill, grabbing your pen tool, go ahead and click and pull to create the form of the highlight that you want. Once you have this created, you can move it, shift it, alter it, scale it, size it, just like anything else. And one of the benefits of having it as a path or shape is that if you notice that you created it slightly wrong or you want to make any changes, you can. So like if one side's a little off or you want an imperfection of some sort, you can go back. So now that you've seen the two ways in which to create a highlight, go ahead and create a front highlight and a back highlight. So I'm going to create my next highlight layer by clicking a new layer icon and choosing Highlight 2 and using my pen tool, I'm going to click and pull, just kind of create my form that I want. Knowing I can change it if I want to. And then using my white arrow here, I can move a point and adjust it. All right, so now I have my two highlights created. We want to blur them and add some texture. So to do that, we need to do a couple things. One is if you created the shapes utilizing the actual pen tool or shape tool, you need to make sure you rasterize these for the stage that we're going to do next. So you're going to right click on the gray area and choose rasterize layer. If you created these with a marquee, which is the dancing ants forms of the ellipse, your box should already look like this without a little shape icon, so you do not need to do this step. But for both of mine, since I built them with the shape tool, I need to rasterize them, so I'm right-clicking and rasterizing my layers. Now that I've done that, I need to blur each of these, and I want to blur them differently because one's in the foreground and one's kind of heading towards the background direction, so I'm going to blur them differently. Okay, so for highlight 2, I want to blur this slightly more, so I'm going to go up to my filter, blur, choose Gaussian blur, and I want to choose 10. Yeah, nice little highlight. Okay, and then going to highlight 1, I want to go to filter, blur, and this time I want to blur just slightly less by going to 8. Choose OK. Now that I have both my highlights created, now I want to add a little bit of texture. And to do that, we need to add a new step. So we're going to create another layer, and we're going to create a new layer here, and we're going to name this one black. Just as the layer says, we're going to fill this with black, but to do that we need to select the form of the apple first by hitting Command or Control and either clicking on the apple thumbnail or the texture thumbnail in the layers panel. And as you can see, you now have dancing ants in the form of the apple. Making sure you're on the black layer, go ahead and hit Shift, Backspace, or Delete, and then choosing black. Okay, now we want to make sure we see all the highlights, so we're going to drag the black layer below highlight 1, so we have highlight 2, highlight 1, and black visible here. So it looks kind of creepy, not great yet. So the next thing we want to do is merge these, so all 3 of them are on the same layer. So we're going to hold down Shift, select our layer, highlight 2 layer, so that way all 3 of these are gray. And then we're going to right click and just simply go down to merge layers. Now that you have this created, we're going to add a little bit of texture. So I'm going to ask that you deselect by hitting Command or Control D. I go up to Filter, go down to Filter Gallery, and then we're actually going to go to Brush Stroke, and we're going to choose Spatter. Once you have that set up, we're going to adjust our radius and our sizing here. So we have the spatter here, but our radius is a little bit, so we're going to reduce that down to about 6. And then we're going to go to our smoothness, and we're going to increase this up a bit to about 14. Now, but what we're looking for is this kind of texturing here. So you can see like it's not a smooth texture. You can see a little elements there. That's what we're looking for. And the reason why we need the black and the white together is so they will blend together. So the black and the white are creating these gray textures throughout, and that's what we're looking for. Once we are happy with this visual, choose OK. And now we have a nice gray texture. And remember talking about our blending modes when we talked about how the white will hide when we choose multiply, and screen will hide the black when we choose screen. So going to our blending modes up on the top here, going down to the word screen will hide all that black but still show all the white and its texture. It's looking good. So the next thing is to create some color highlights. So we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to actually do 2 color highlights. One in kind of like an orange tone and one in like a yellow tone. If you have a different color and you don't like these, this will work for green. It'll even work for purple. But for the yellow, you might want to try green and red rather than yellow and orange. So first we're going to create a nice giant orange hotspot. So we're going to create a new layer, and I'm just going to name this orange. Now I'm going to create and choose my coloring first. So I'm going to choose kind of like an orangey yellow. And I'm going to grab my gradient tool, and on the very top here I'm going to go to where it says gradient to transparent, the foreground to transparent gradient, and making sure it's on radial. And again, you want the dark on the left and the transparency on the right, and if this is not happening, make sure you click your reverse feature. So now that I have that set up, the next thing I want to do is I don't want the gradient to go outside my apple form, so I'm going to go down to my apple layer and hold down my command control feature, so that way anything I do will only stay inside my actual apple form. So going up to my orange layer, making sure it is highlighted, I'm going to grab my gradient tool and I'm going to go in the center of my form here and click and pull. Kind of make a big orange dot. Yeah, looking pretty good. All right, and then the next one I'm going to do is a yellow one. So I'm going to create a new layer, and this one I'm going to name yellow. And I'm going to change my coloring now to a little bit brighter yellow. So I'm going to slide my gradient up here, choose OK. And this time I'm going to do a little bit smaller. So I'm going to kind of grab a little bit higher up, and then I'm going to click and pull maybe a little bit larger than that. So I'm going to undo by hitting Command Z, and this time I'm going to grab larger ones. Undo, I'm even larger than that. Let's try that. Yeah. Okay. Once I do that, I'm going to change my blending modes. So my yellow, I'm going to try a hard light here by going to hard light under blending modes. And then for my orange, it's just a little too intense. So I'm going to go orange, and I'm going to change my blending mode to hue. Yes. Very nice. So go ahead and play with it. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but you want to kind of see a little bit of different coloring happening. You can even mess with your opacity a little bit, or you can also change this at any time later as you move through these stages. Now that I've created both my color highlights, now I want to create a backlight for my apple. So I'm going to create a new layer here, and I'm going to name this backlight. Now, currently I have my apple form, my circle, selected where I have dancing ants moving around it. If you don't, go down to either your texture or your apple icon, holding down Command or Control, and click the icon on these, and it should activate your marquee in the form of that shape. On the backlight layer, again here, fill with white. Go Shift, Backspace or Delete, and choose Content White. Choose OK. And now you have a white dot. Now, this is where it's really important. You're going to make sure you're on the ellipse marquee or any marquee tool in the toolbar. Using the arrow keys on your keyboard, use your left arrow and move to the left 10 times. Once you've done that, hit delete and then deselect. All right, now you should have a crescent white shape right here at the edge and a little bit of a coloring coming through. Once you have this created, now we're going to soften this by blurring this. So we're going to go up to our filter tool, go down to blur, and choose Gaussian blur. Then we're going to choose our radius. Actually, I'm really liking the 8. let's leave the pixel radius at 8. Once this is created, choose OK. The next thing we want to do is alter our shadow down here at the bottom and soften that up. So on our backlight here, I'm going to choose my mask button, and on my mask I'm just going to choose a gradient, and I want to make sure it's black to white. So I'm going to choose my foreground to background, black and white, or you can go to the third one in, which is black and white. And I want a linear gradient this time, linear. And black hides, white shows. So since my black's on my left, I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm just going to drag to where I want it to start to fade away. As you can see, and I can drag more or less in the direction I want. But what I'm looking for is kind of where I want the highlight to slow down, where it starts to get into the shadow area. All right, so now that we have our backlight set up, you have completed part 1 of the video. Go ahead and save and then check out part 2.